Welcome to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman here with Ryan D'Amico.
What's up, man? What's up? Yeah, we are back. We are back for another week, another installment of the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. As always, Zach, looking forward to another week closer to playoffs. The playoff picture's starting to kind of come into shape a little bit. There's obviously still some teams that are hanging on, trying to make that final push. Some teams that did get eliminated, and we're going to break it all down for you here and get into some other things along the way as well. And our final thought piece is a pretty cool idea that you threw out there this week that I'm excited to talk about. So I think it's going to be a really good show, a really fun show, and a really informative show. Also, I'm very
excited as well.
Real quick. So you know how a couple weeks ago, or it was like last month, we put out that show bashing ESPN and all those mainstream media products that they throw at our face, right?
Right.
So. And we kind of talked about some people that we didn't care for on major networks. I'm going to add another person to that list really quickly that I just want to throw out. And listen to how idiotic this statement is. Okay, Maurice Jones-Drew. Obviously, you remember Maurice Jones-Drew from the NFL.
Yeah, he was a fun player to watch. Real small guy, incredibly quick, like a strong guy too.
Yep. Exactly. That's the one. He's on NFL Network now, and he's on a show called NFL Power Rankings that comes out every Tuesday, and they put out their power rankings for the week. They go from week to week. He comes out and says, first he said it last week and looked like a buffoon. Now he said it again this week, and I'm like flabbergasted. So last week he said when Wentz went down that the Eagles were going to lose every game the rest of the season. That means they were going to lose to the Giants, the Raiders, the Cowboys, and then whoever they face in the playoffs. Well, he was wrong about that because the Eagles beat the Giants. Now he comes on the air tonight and says they're going to lose the rest of their games again. He was just off by a week. It's like you wonder with some of these guys. It's like, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say like he's just kind of saying that just to kind of get conversation started. But like at the end of the day too, I'm like, you know what? Maybe he's serious. Like, I don't know. I was just really kind of dumbfounded when he said that and thought it was a really idiotic statement, especially for someone that's on national television.
Yeah, even as a Cowboys fan, I can't agree with that. Like we talked about it last week. I have a respect for Nick Foles. I think he's on the top end of the backup quarterbacks in the league. And they still have a great team around him that's been this good the entire year. So I fully disagree. I don't see that happening. The Eagles losing out. And even a team like the Raiders who did not look good. Like that's right. A team I feel the Eagles are easily a favorite in that game.
They're a 9-point favorite too. Vegas thinks they're a 9-point favorite. It's just I just wanted to throw that out there just to kind of vent somewhat, I guess you could say, because I heard that not shortly after we got together here and got our show together. So it was just fresh in my mind. I just wanted to throw that out there. So I got that off my chest. I'm good.
But if you didn't check that out, that is, I believe, our episode 21, where we talked about ESPN, how we grew up on that, loving it, and just it's really gone down in our eyes. We don't pay as much attention, and we have a lot of frustrations with it, and that's one of the things we went over. So we'd love if you check it out. I know that's our most popular episode at this point here, so we're still trying to build this up, and that's one of the things we're very proud we put out there.
Absolutely, go check it out.
Well, from that point, we're diving into the games from this past week in the NFL.
Let's do it.
Started a little differently this week with a Thursday night game and then some Saturday games. The Thursday night game, not talkable about at all. Not an interesting game there. The Broncos beating the Colts are both bad teams. Neither of us have anything to say on that, so we're going to move straight into one of the Saturday games. And this is one that we went back and forth on before the game started. So last week's podcast where the Chiefs came out and handled the Chargers. They beat them 30-13 behind a monster game from Kareem Hunt. He had 155 yards and a touchdown on the ground. He had 51 yards and a touchdown through the air. He carried 2 of my fantasy teams, so I love seeing that production. Hopefully he can continue that in my 2 fantasy championship games I'm headed into here. Tyreek Hill also had a big game with 88 yards and a touchdown. And then the Chargers were really hurt there by 3 interceptions from Phillip Rivers. He has been very hot lately. He's had 3 or 4 straight weeks where he was really good heading into this game and really dropped off. That's what hurt him the most and dropped them this game behind the Kansas City Chiefs in that tough division race and in the wild card race as well. That hurts the Chargers a little bit, puts them a little bit behind there, even though they were streaking up until this point.
Yeah, this one hurts, man. My Chargers, they took it on the chin, and it sucks because I don't think that they're going to be able to bounce back and get into the playoffs at this point. I really don't. I think this was their playoffs, and and it's unfortunate because they didn't play well as a team. It's not like one facet of the game let down the other. I mean, just collectively as a team, they just didn't play well at all. And like Zach said, I mean, they were streaking there. I mean, defense was playing well. Offense was clicking. Rivers. I mean, Christ, Zach, last week they almost put up 400 total yards in the first half against Washington 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, this team was rolling. And, they come into Arrowhead, Saturday night primetime game, everyone's watching, and they just completely lay an egg. And the big thing was they were having success pushing the ball down the field with Phillip Rivers and connecting on some of them deep passes. They didn't connect on one on Saturday night. A couple of them were intercepted, some miscommunication between Rivers and the receivers. So that really struggled. And the defensive line couldn't get pressure on Alex Smith. Credit Andy Reid and the coaching staff for kind of mixing in some of the shorter developing routes and then taking their shots when they needed to. So I thought that game plan was really, really well executed. So tip of the hat to the Chiefs. They had their little hiccup there in the season where they lost 6 in a row. Excuse me. Speaking of a hiccup, I just have one myself there. And then they won 2 in a row. So it looks like, barring some sort of crazy collapse, looks like they're going to take the AFC West championship.
Yeah, they definitely put themselves in a great situation there. And it's good to see them feeding Kareem Hunt. He got 24 carries in this game. That's something they've really went away from when they had that losing streak where they were struggling a lot more. So that's something, if they want to win, I think they have to continue that. As soon as they went away from it, they were struggling.
Absolutely. Got to keep feeding them. Obviously for your sake too, with having him on your fantasy team with Kareem Hunt. So, look, he's a special player, and he kind of, obviously, had a tough little stretch there in the beginning of the season, but, we're coming into some colder weather now. I mean, you got to lean on the running game a little bit more than you would in September and October. Need to feed him the ball.
We'll move there to a couple other teams that are right on the verge of the AFC playoffs. And the first one's the Buffalo Bills, who 2 of their last 3 games are against the Miami Dolphins, and they won the first of those matchups this week, 24-16. They moved to 8-6. They're currently sitting in a wild card position, but this is a team I've doubted for a long time. I still just can't see them actually making the playoffs. Although, respect for getting this win. They got the Patriots next and then the Dolphins again. They'll need for sure at least one of those wins, which you'd expect it to be the Dolphins game. I can't see the Bills, for the life of me, possibly beating the Patriots this coming week. But they did hold a 24-6 lead in the fourth quarter. They got up to a huge lead there. Miami, coming off a week where they beat the Patriots, just looked like garbage, and a big contributor to that was Jay Cutler throwing 3 interceptions. He had almost 50 passing attempts, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. They're not going to win that way at all.
No, and, the Dolphins are what they are. We talked about them before on the show, and they're just not a very good team. I mean, the quarterback position's obviously their biggest kind of, Achilles heel at this point. So, as far as the Bills go, look, it's unfortunate because I'm kind of pulling for the Bills at this point. Just for everything Tyrod Taylor went through, and I've always liked LaShawn McCoy, which he was obviously still in the Eagles. And look, they haven't been – we talked about it earlier in the year. This team hasn't been in the playoffs since 1999. So, that would be pretty special for them to get into the playoffs and break that streak. So, I'm kind of pulling for them. It's unfortunate that they have the Patriots coming up this week. Obviously, that hurts. You would have liked to have had an easier game. But, look, everything's right in front of them. I mean, look, it's difficult, yes. But 2 weeks ago, Miami beat the Patriots. It's not like it can't be done. So, go in there, play with some purpose, and try to get a win. And, I hope they do, because I would love for them to sneak in as the last seed. I think that'd be pretty cool for them. And like I said, I'm rooting for LaShawn McCoy. LaShawn McCoy surpassed 10,000 rushing yards, Zach, in his career on Sunday. So that's another big milestone. If he keeps this up, he's trending in the right direction to – maybe get into the Hall of Fame. I think he has – I definitely think he has a handful, obviously, of good years left. If he can get a championship in there somewhere, I mean, obviously it doesn't look like it's going to happen with the Bills, but, I mean, if he can, go somewhere else and catch on and get a Super Bowl late in his career, I mean, I definitely think those are Hall of Fame numbers. And let me shout out a local high school from around this area, Bishop McDevitt, who LaShawn McCoy went to. Sean McCoy went to Bishop McDevitt, and if you remember, that's former high school of former NFL running back Ricky Waters. They are the only high school in America to produce two 10,000-yard running backs in the NFL. So shout out to PA, shout out to Bishop McDevitt, local high school around here. That's a pretty big accomplishment there. So just a little insert there for the local high school.
I like that. I'm looking it up right now because I know Marquise Colston was another great player that came from that area too, that Harrisburg area in Pennsylvania. I don't know what high school specifically.
I can't remember. I know he went to Hofstra.
Yeah, it looks like Susquehanna Township High School is the first one that comes up. So he must have just been in that area because I know I had a friend that he worked in a gym around there, and he had Shady McCoy and Marquise Colston were both coming in to work out around that time. So they both came from that same area. So like you mentioned with Ricky Waters too, who was an incredible player in the 90s there for the 49ers and then the Eagles. That's produced some talent there from that area.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And like I said, I'm rooting for the Bills at this point. I hope they squeak in.
It'd be fun to see there. We'll move from there to another team, like I said, on the edge of the AFC playoffs, which is the Baltimore Ravens beating the 0-14 Browns. The Ravens are sitting nicely there at an 8-6 record. There's not a lot to talk about in this game. Alex Collins kind of struggled after he's played well at the Ravens running back position, although Buck Allen came in and had one of his better games. Isaiah Crowell only got 5 carries from the Browns, so that was a little bit weird to see. It did end up being 27-10, not that close, that the Ravens were able to win, and they've got 2 great matchups to get them in the playoffs right here. So first they've got the Colts playing at home, playing in Baltimore, and then they've got the Bengals also in Baltimore. So definitely they'll need to pick up one of those to get in the playoffs. Two is gonna lock it in for them if they can get both of those wins. And the Colts have been bad. Bengals have been a little more up and down, but mostly bad this year. So I think they have a great path to make the playoffs once again.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 wins and they're in for sure. And I mean, it's not all that difficult. Look, I know anything can happen in the NFL. I mean, we see it week in and week out. But 2 home games against those 2 inferior teams, you have to like their chances there. And a little bit of a closer game than maybe people would have thought against Cleveland this past weekend. But look, if I'm any team right now, vying for a playoff spot, I know it sounds crazy, but I really don't want to play the Browns right now. I know they're not good, and I know you probably are going to win, but I mean, they're trying their hardest right now to get a win. I mean, they don't want to go an entire season without getting wins. So, I mean, they're going to give you everything that they have. And I know most of the time, and every time this year, it's not enough. But still, I just would not want to play them right now. So, Baltimore, one of them teams that's playing pretty good football at the right time, and not sure if they have enough firepower to keep up with some of the top teams in the AFC, mainly the first three seeds. But, definitely a team that can win a playoff game. That's for sure.
And the last team we'll get to here that's hanging on to currently a wild card spot is the Tennessee Titans, who lost at the last second this past week on a Robbie Gould field goal. It's 25-23, 49ers win. They pick up their third straight win with Jimmy Garoppolo as quarterback since they traded for him from the Patriots. Their big stat guy this week was Marquise Goodwin. 10 catches, 114 yards. So that's nice to see. He's been productive throughout the year. He's had kind of those explosive games like that one specifically, whereas really big games, he'll have others that are 2 catches for 30 yards, something like that. Not that impressive. But when he goes off, he definitely goes off like that. So he's kind of stood out. He might be a piece that stays around for the next couple years with Jimmy Garoppolo, clearly looking like a solid quarterback for them moving in. So it's good for them. At one point they were 1-10 and now gaining some momentum heading into next year. This could be a team on the rise next year, like we've seen with the Rams or the Jaguars this year.
Yeah, we were talking before we went on the air here that they're definitely a team that's on the rise. I mean, you have to like what you got in Garoppolo. It seems that has turned out okay. It wasn't just a mirage what he did in New England. It wasn't a byproduct of a system or anything. I mean, and because he's doing it here, San Francisco, with, I mean, really not a ton of talent around him. The running game isn't anything special, and the weapons that he has around them are just a bunch of average to below average players, really. So, I mean, you lock in your quarterback in Garoppolo now. Now you can go out and try to get some weapons around them. You found the franchise quarterback. You build around it. That's how you win in the NFL. You get your franchise quarterback, and you build around him. We're seeing it all across the NFL for the most part with some of these younger teams. That's the way you kind of have to approach it for the most part. So, look, they're going to have another good pick this year, another piece that they can add that can come in and help right away. So I like what they're doing there in San Francisco and what new GM John Lynch has done. As far as the Titans go, man, I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about them. I mean, this team, like, I don't know what to relate it to, man. Is it coaching, or is it just the product on the field and the players not performing? Because, I mean, the last 2 weeks, I mean, for you to go to Arizona and lose 12-7 and then go to San Francisco and lose 25-23, like, that's embarrassing. I mean, for a team that is supposed to get into the playoffs, they're probably still going to get into the playoffs because they hold the tiebreaker over, like, the Ravens and I think one other team. So they're probably still going to sneak in, you would think. 2 tough games to finish the year, though. So, I mean, I know it's not a certainty. I mean, they have to play the Rams this weekend and then a home against the Jaguars. So, tough schedule to close the year. But, I mean, this team just does not look like a team that, like, it almost looks like a team that, like, doesn't care. Like, they're just out there, like, going through the motions. I mean, just terrible. I mean, really, really bad.
I haven't gotten to see them play at all, so I'm not sure what exactly to assess as any kind of problem on their team, but they've really dropped off lately after quite the hot start there. They lost their first game against Oakland and then continued going pretty well streaking until these last 2 bad losses against poor teams. Both were away against the Cardinals and against the 49ers. And like you said, we talked about the opposite with the Ravens having a good schedule, 2 easier games, and they're sitting at the same record as this Titans team. So somehow the Titans have to pull out one of these wins to be able to hang around in the playoffs. And this is a team we thought was a lock a couple weeks ago when they were really rolling. It seemed like they were far ahead of some of those other potential wild card teams, but now they're fighting for their lives to be able to make it into the playoffs.
It's funny because if I'm the Steelers or if I'm the Patriots or the Jaguars or any one of those top 4 seeds that could possibly play this team, I'm hoping they get in. I'm hoping I can play this team. I'm sorry, but they're not going to go if they get in as a 6 seed or a 5 seed. They're not going on the road to any of those teams and winning. Like, sorry, you can't even go on the road and beat Arizona or San Francisco for God's sakes. Late in the year. You want to lose those games in September and October. I'll give you a pass. All right, it's the beginning of the year. Those games you can rebound from. These games are tough to rebound from. So, Tennessee, man. Good luck. They need to kind of reevaluate things there in Tennessee.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They have some solid pieces there with Marcus Mariota still being very young, Derrick Henry at the young running back position. They just took Corey Davis very high in the first round. So they have some young pieces to build around, especially on that offense. I think it's got to come together over these next couple of years as they're building and improving, and we'll see if they're able to do that. I'm very confident this is not the year for it to come together that well for them.
That's true. They are still very young and need to add some more pieces. So see how things go the rest of the year and into next year.
And from there, we'll go very quickly. The Lions beat the Bears this past weekend. It was 20-10. At one point, it was 20-3. There wasn't much of a question that they were going to win. They're clearly a lot better than the Bears. The Bears have had some good games and been in it against good teams. This was not one of them. The Bears looked like a 4-10 team in this one. The Lions, they moved to 8-6. The big news from this was Amir Abdullah being benched for them. We've criticized this running game the entire year, and finally it's like the Lions have taken notice. They started giving a lot of first-half carries to Theo Riddick and then getting Tion Green involved, especially in the second half. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with those three guys and who ends up really leading this team in rushing if they are going to make the playoffs. They're sitting at 8-6. So they're in somewhat of a solid position. They have 2 winnable games, but not easy games. They play at Cincinnati against the Bengals, and then they play at home against the Green Bay Packers, who now have Aaron Rodgers back, and that'll be his 3rd game back. So he should be in a much better rhythm at that point.
Real quick, Zach, you must have missed the news. They actually shut Rodgers down today.
Oh, I did not see that yet.
They put him on injured reserve because they're officially out of the playoffs now with that loss that we'll talk about here shortly. So he's gone. So they'll be facing Brett Hundley in that contest.
Well, that makes it a much better schedule for him there with the Bengals. Even though it's away, that's a winnable game, and then the Packers with Brett Hundley at quarterback, also a winnable game. But they went on a little winning streak there before Aaron Rodgers came back. So, like I said, neither of those games is an easy game for them. So they've got to figure something out here, like I said, with the running back position, with their offensive consistency, if they're going to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, the best thing from that game on Saturday was the celebration from 5 or so Detroit Lions with the Rockette celebration. I don't know if you saw that, but that was pretty funny. I thought that was really good. That was the best thing from that game. That game was terrible. I'm not even going to talk about the game. We'll just fast forward here quick to Detroit's playoff chances. I follow a lot of Detroit Lions fans on Twitter, mainly because they are writers and fans of the University of Michigan, who I follow. So they are, in turn, Lions fans. And it's funny reading through their tweets during NFL games because they're very similar to mine with the Eagles. Like, they expect the worst. They get really pissed off easily. Like, they're exactly like me. And they are at a point in the season where I've been there as an Eagles fan before. When your team's around the verge of the playoffs, they're all like, come on, guys. If we know how this story is going to end, they just get our hopes up, and then they'll screw it up. And that's kind of what I see happening with this team. Like, maybe like winning this week and then like laying an egg in the finale when if they win, they're in. Like, that's what I see. I don't see them personally getting into the playoffs. I think they're going to be one of those teams left out, maybe the first team left out. But you're right, 2 very winnable games. And, I mean, let's see. I mean, basically someone's just got to – one of these teams just has to step up and take control. And, Detroit can definitely be one of those teams. They have the talent. I mean, they have the talent on both sides of the ball, and they have a favorable schedule. So, they're definitely a team that can do it, but I personally wouldn't put my money on them just because we've seen them fail so many times before.
Yeah, we definitely have. It seems like they just don't make changes over the past couple of years, they've stuck with a questionable running game, leaning on Matthew Stafford, and it seems to always get the same results of them being right around the edge of the playoffs, trying to fight their way in, and if they make it, losing early on.
Right.
We'll go there to another game within the division. Minnesota blowing out Cincinnati 34-7. The Vikings moved to 11-3. They're hanging around the top of the NFC. Bengals dropped to 5-9. We did have a Teddy Bridgewater sighting in this game. He came in, threw 2 passes, threw an interception. So it'll be interesting to see with their quarterbacks this coming off season, because I'm pretty sure Case Keenum's a free agent. I know Bridgewater is going to be a free agent. And then Sam Bradford is supposed to be a free agent as well. So they've got to get something figured out with the quarterback position long term. But as of now, Case Keenum looked fantastic stat-wise. He completed 20 of 23 passes, which is 87% completion percentage. You don't see that very often. He also threw 2 touchdowns. They didn't have any problems against this terrible Cincinnati team. And the big news from this, at the end of the season, Marvin Lewis is now stepping down. I know that's a guy you have questioned him deserving a job, and now he's not going to have one. So this Bengals team is going to be able to move on in some different direction, and it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing.
Yeah, the Bengals, they must have been out partying on Saturday night when the news broke that Marvin Lewis wasn't coming back. That must have been why they played so damn poorly. They were probably hungover and, felt like dog shit for this game because they were out celebrating the news that Marvin Lewis was going to step down, and maybe this team actually will have a shot now and maybe getting to the playoffs and winning a playoff game. He's got them there, but he hasn't gotten them a playoff win. So, look, this had to happen one way or the other. I think Marvin Lewis realized, look, either I step down or I'm going to get fired. I think he just beat the Bengals to the punch, really. So he's going to be gone. He definitely would have been gone had he not have stepped down. So, I think it's the best thing that could have happened for the Bengals. As far as the Vikings go, they look like they keep rolling. A nice bounce back win from the tough road loss against the Panthers the week before. I mean, they do what good teams are supposed to do. You come back home off a loss against a very bad team, and you get out to a big lead early, and you don't look back. And that's what they did. They were able to get Bridgewater some reps and call it a day. Lock up the division, and possibly if things go to plan this weekend, get a first round bye. So. Things are going pretty well in Minnesota. Things are going really well in Minnesota. Keenum had a very nice game. It's going to be funny with these NFC playoffs, man. We're going to have a lot of quarterbacks without a lot of playoff experience. So the NFC playoffs is going to be extremely interesting.
I agree. There's a lot of unusual storylines and things like that you mentioned with different quarterbacks that are limited in experience in the playoffs. So that should be exciting. I know for me, looking at this Bengals team, I think it's time for them to go with a full rebuild. Do something to move Andy Dalton. I think either give A.J. McCarron a chance, draft a quarterback. They've got Joe Mixon. He didn't play in this game. He's got a concussion, I'm pretty sure it is, right now. So he was out this week once again. Gio Bernard got the start. I think Gio Bernard's a decent number 2 running back, kind of receiving back, but he's not a long-term player for him. I think they've really got to try and build around someone like Joe Mixon, and even AJ Green, I don't really see fitting into it for him. He's a little bit older. I'm pretty sure he's 29. He's a fantastic player. I think they should keep him around if they can, but that might have to be a casualty of that they trade him away at some point this year or the coming year after that. To go into a full rebuild. I think they've gone with the same unit for a long time, it seems like, and it just hasn't produced. Their coach is gone. This is a perfect time to go into some kind of rebuild and try and get younger and more talented and bring in some different faces there.
Yeah, I like that. I do. I actually like that kind of perspective there. Get a new head coach in there, let him get his players in that he kind of likes and kind of go from there. So, and look, I wouldn't be against AJ Green. Moving on from AJ Green, I'm not sure what his contract looks like, but he might be a nice player you could flip and get some nice pieces for draft picks, maybe a young player, I mean, whatever. That could definitely be an option that they go down for sure. So, yeah, I'm not against that at all, and I definitely think Dalton's a guy. Dalton is who he is. Like, he's not going to get any better. Like, he's not going to, he's not still young to where, he's going to develop. No, like, Andy Dalton is who he is, and he's not a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's just not. So, I'm totally in agreement with you with them and going that direction for sure.
Yeah. And there's other teams that could use Andy Dalton. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler. He's not a top-end quarterback, but he could fit well, kind of like in a Case Keenum role where he is with the Vikings there. They have some good pieces around him. Maybe the Broncos, they have a mess at quarterback, could take a chance on him as a short-term kind of filler while they have such a good defense. They could try something like that. He's definitely, I'm not questioning him as an NFL quarterback. I just don't think he's any kind of future here on the Cincinnati Bengals.
I completely agree.
Our next game we'll move to, staying in the same division, going from the Vikings, we'll now move to the Packers game. And you mentioned before they eliminated themselves from the playoffs with this loss, 31-24 against the Carolina Panthers. Panthers are sitting nicely with that 10-4 record there. It was Aaron Rodgers' return. Unfortunately, that's all we'll see from him. The Packers have a little bit of an odd situation there at running back where Jamal Williams has been getting a lot of carries. He only had 10 carries for 30 yards in this game. They gave Aaron Jones 3 carries, but he outgained Jamal Williams by 17 yards. He had 3 carries for 47 yards. Last week, he had that 1 carry for the game-winning touchdown. I believe it was from 20 yards out. So he's a very explosive player. It'll be interesting to see if they continue using him more as he does produce like that. And then Cam Newton had a big game in this one, 242 yards passing, through for 4 touchdowns to lead the Panthers to a victory.
Yeah, I mean – I laughed for a long time and I know it's for storyline purposes, but I laughed for a while when people were saying like Rodgers is back and the Packers make a run and I didn't see it just because it's clear that Rodgers is still banged up. I mean, really. I mean, it goes to show you they shut him down today after they got eliminated from playoffs. He was only in there just to try to see if they could get into the playoffs and make a run. So he was clearly not 100% healthy. I mean, he had 3 interceptions, made some bad throws, wasn't very Aaron Rodgers-like. 2, and it really showed in this Carolina game, that defense is terrible. I talked about it before on the show. That defense is really bad. I mean, Carolina, kind of a middling offense. They've gotten the run game going the last few weeks. It continued on Sunday. I mean, but for you to let Aaron Rodgers for you to let Cam Newton throw 250 yards and 4 touchdowns, that kind of says all you need to know right there. So that defense, they have to figure out that defense. I mean, because you can't keep wasting Aaron Rodgers year in and year out and hoping he can just carry you through to the playoffs and through the playoffs and to a Super Bowl. So they need to figure out that out. Carolina, look, they're playing good football right now. They're kind of on a nice little roll. They're a team right now that's probably feeling pretty good about themselves, has a chance to win that competitive NFC South here, and doing a lot with running the football. Continue to do that. Had a nice stat sheet as far as running the ball this weekend goes. I know McCaffrey had a nice game. He rushed for 63 yards. Newton chimed in for 58, and then Jonathan Stewart had 27. So collectively, they're up and over 150 yards. So the Panthers, it's funny. The Panthers are such a weird team to me. I don't know how you feel about the Panthers, Zach, but I'm so like on the edge with them and just like waiting for them to try to pull me back because I still am just not 100% sold on them. Like I'm just not 100% sold on the Panthers. Getting into the playoffs and having to play some of these games on the road, I'm not so sure about, but they go as Cam Newton goes. I mean, if Cam Newton doesn't have a good game, 9 times out of 10, they're going to lose. Cam Newton plays well, throws for 250 yards and 4 touchdowns, chances are they're going to win. So they go how they go, and as they get into the playoffs, they're going to see some better defenses and better defenses on the road.
I'm in 100% agreement. They go as Cam goes. there's some pieces around him, but they're trying to go with Devin Funchess as a number one receiver. That's just not what I see him as. He's been solid this year, but they need more pieces in that receiver group for them to really work out. It was good to see in this game the return of Greg Olsen with a big game. He had 9 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey did some good things on both the ground and through the air. He had 73 yards and a touchdown through the air, in addition to 63 rushing yards. So with that going, I think their running game struggled all year, but when they can have those things that work with Olsen getting a lot of receptions, especially short receptions, and them relying on that, it doesn't matter when someone like Jonathan Stewart doesn't have a good rushing game. And then when he goes crazy like he did a week or two ago when he had over 100 yards, great, even better for them. So they have some definite question marks, but they've been pretty well at adapting for the most part to the pieces around Cam. They just cannot stand up to Cam not playing well. They don't have the pieces to recover from him. The other players, the other holes they have, they can kind of fill those as they go. So it'll be interesting to see. They're a team that can upset some teams in the playoffs, I think. But they can also be upset by some of these lower teams, depending on the day, depending on how Cam Newton is playing.
Completely agree with you. I mean, you put the Panthers up against, the Falcons or the Lions or the Cowboys, any of those lower seeds right now in the NFC, that spread's no greater than 3 against any of those opponents. I would be hard-pressed to say. So, I mean, it definitely – I think you make a good point. They can definitely be upset by any one of those lower seeds. So, it's definitely imperative that they keep this running game going that it has been over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So that's big. It obviously helps Cam out a lot. So they're an interesting team going down the stretch.
And it's interesting to me, they're sitting at 10-4. Their next 2 games, they play the Buccaneers and then the Falcons. The Saints also at the top of that division, sitting at 10-4. Their next 2 games, the Falcons and then the Bucs. So they completely, both of those teams hold their own destiny.
In the Falcons. Well, so the Falcons too.
Yeah,
if the Falcons win out, they win the division. So this is a very interesting division. It's the best division in football for sure this year, most competitive. So it's going to be interesting to see what team takes control. I mean, we haven't talked about the Falcons yet because they were the Monday night game, but let's just jump ahead real quick, Zach. Who do you think ultimately will win this division?
I actually think it's going to be the Panthers. I think they're set up the best. They have beaten both the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons, even though this one's at Atlanta. I think if they drop one, it's definitely that game. But I think the Panthers end up winning this division here.
That's kind of the way I was leaning. I thought you were going to say the Saints, but that's kind of the direction that I'm leaning is the Panthers. I think they're sitting pretty good there, and I just kind of like the way that they're playing, some momentum here. I didn't like what I saw from the Saints on Sunday, letting the Jets hang around. That game was in New Orleans. Obviously, we'll talk about that here briefly in a little bit. Didn't really like that. And the Falcons, look, they're winning, but they're not – I don't like the way they're playing. They're not really passing the eye test for me. So I like Carolina. I agree.
Now, like you mentioned with the Saints, they did beat the Jets. They moved to 10-4. The Jets dropped to 5-9. It was 31-19. The Jets were in it more than a lot of people expected. But that's been a trend with the Jets the whole year. The only difference here was they had Bryce Petty as their starting quarterback in place of Josh McCown, who's been very solid throughout the year. But they were still able to hang around there. I know the Saints was a team I took a gamble on their defense in one of my fantasy teams. They were just kind of all right. I thought they'd get some more turnovers against an unproven quarterback like Bryce Petty there. But I still like that Saints team. I really enjoy watching them. They have a very fun offense. They have a lot of talented players there on the offensive end. Their defense has looked a lot better. I know Marshawn Lattimore is a guy that stood out to me as a very good up-and-coming player there at the cornerback position for them. So they're a good team. And they will not make this an easy run for the Panthers to win that division. But I still give the edge to the Panthers just barely. I could see the Falcons losing both of these games, playing the Panthers and playing the Saints first and then playing the Panthers.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, with the Saints, let's not forget, this was a 5-point game with 2 minutes left in this game until Ingram breaks off a big run to make the score look a little more lopsided than it really was. So the Saints they're another team that I don't know how much I completely buy into that defense once you go into the playoffs and once they have to, kind of go outside in the divisional round if they get past the wild card round. So I'm not, too sure about that. Breeze has been okay this year. I've watched a lot of his games because I had him in fantasy in one of my leagues. I saw him week after week kind of routinely miss guys that he normally wouldn't hit. So I'm not sure if that's just him not getting into a rhythm as much because they're not throwing the ball as much because they have been so reliant on the running game this year. I'm not sure, but they need Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara to keep running the ball really well going into the playoffs. And they need the defense to, be good. I don't think the defense needs to be great by any means. I'm not sure that they're a great defense anyway. So, but with Breeze and with that offense and the weapons they have, and Michael Thomas, who's one of my favorite receivers in the NFL, I think he's a fantastic receiver. He's going to be really good for years to come. They definitely pose a threat to anybody in that NFC and even to the seeds that are above them. So I was a little bummed with the Saints this weekend. I kind of hold a little bit of a grudge to this weekend because I had Brees and Michael Thomas in my fantasy playoff matchup, and they had 2 touchdowns taken off the board. One because they said he was down at the half-yard line, and another one he didn't get his second foot in bounds. So I was a little bitter, but Saints still a very good team for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll move from that game into 2 different major blowouts by some high quality playoff teams here. They're sitting towards the top of their conference. The first one's Jacksonville Jaguars moving to 10-4 against the Houston Texans. I know I don't have a lot of notes on this game. Jaguars win 45-7. It was fascinating to me to look through and see Keelan Cole, their leading receiver, had 186 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Mickens was their second leading receiver, 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. They've had some production lately from D.D. Westbrook. He only had 21 yards in this. These are their low-end receivers. They lost Allen Robinson, their number 1 receiver, at the very beginning of the season. Yep. They have Allen Hurns, who they just signed to a big contract extension. He's been out most of the year. They were missing Marquise Lee in this game. They've had all kinds of injuries, and they still just dominated this Texans team. They still got great production from these kind of low roster guys that have been very productive on this team, and I'm very, very impressed with that.
Yeah, 2 things. One, it goes to show you how just terrible Houston's pass defense has been so bad all year, and this just really reiterates that point. I mean, you have those 2 guys putting up those kind of numbers. That goes to show you all they need to do, and what they need to really focus on in the offseason is the back end of that defense for sure. But then the Jaguars, look, you have to give them credit. I mean, this team makes the playoffs. They punched their ticket for the first time in 10 years, Zach. Last time they made their playoffs, we were graduating from high school. That's pretty crazy to think about. So,
yeah.
And we talked about it last week, and you talked about it a little bit more than I did. Blake Bortles just continues to play well, and it's not like he's playing like okay and like not turning the ball over, not hurting them. He's playing like really well. Like he's playing the quarterback position really well right now, and with that defense, and obviously they'll get Fournette back. He set out this game with a quad injury. Obviously, they felt they could win without him, and they needed him for the playoffs. Right decision. So you get him back. You have a nice running game there. If Bortles continues to play this well, there is no reason I didn't think I'd be saying this at this point in the season, but there's no reason this Jacksonville Jaguar team cannot get to the Super Bowl. I mean, realistically, Zach, can you see them going into Pittsburgh or New England and winning? I can. With that defense, absolutely. I mean, New England's offense the last month has been really lackluster. The Steelers, who knows how Antonio Brown's going to respond after this calf injury? They already beat Pittsburgh earlier in the year. They forced Roethlisberger into 5 interceptions. So there's no reason the Jaguars could not go to the Super Bowl. There's not.
I can't find an argument against you except for Blake Bortles. I fully agree. The running game's very, very high quality. The defense has been fantastic throughout the year. Blake Bortles has been playing great. As long as that continues, they can beat any of these top teams. I'm in agreement there. If he drops off and plays like he did last year, that's really going to hurt him. But as they're playing right now, I see them being able to beat anyone right now.
That's where coaching, too, needs to come in. If they do end up getting to like a conference championship game or something against Pittsburgh or New England, I mean, I think Doug Marrone's smart enough, I would hope he's smart enough to not drop, Bortles back 45 times and try to have him win the game. Let's, rely on the defense, run the ball, keep that opposing offense off the field. So I definitely think they can give those teams a run for their money. Absolutely.
And as you mentioned, his worst game this year was when he threw 51 passes. He had a 2-interception game.
Who was that against?
It was against the Chargers.
Okay.
So he threw 28 he completed 28 of 51, right around 55% completion percentage with 1 touchdown and those 2 picks. He had another 2-interception game early in the season against Tennessee as well, but he threw 34 times, which is more reasonable. It's kind of at the top of the end of how he normally is, besides that one game where he just threw 51, and it clearly did not go well for them.
Right. Look, if I'm going to say this again, if I'm New England or if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm a little concerned. I am with what Jacksonville has to offer. Look, the AFC is obviously the less competitive, and the NFC is definitely the superior conference this year. I think we can all agree on that. The AFC has Pittsburgh, New England, and now Jacksonville, but the drop off from those 3 teams is pretty significant once you get down to the 4, 5, 6, and then the teams that are battling for the playoffs. Jacksonville set themselves up pretty nicely, and then set themselves up pretty nicely going forward as well. So they're a team I'm really looking forward to watching in the playoffs and see if they can do some damage.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So I have a quick quarterback comparison here. So we're looking at some stats later in the year here. Over the last 4 games, I got player A here.
Okay.
1,046 yards. He's thrown 6 touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
Over the last 4 weeks?
Over the last 4 weeks.
Okay.
So it's
6 touchdowns, 2 picks. All right.
Yeah, right around 250 yards per game. Basically close to 2 touchdowns a game, and like 1.5 touchdowns a game. Player B, 1,063 yards. So just slightly more, 7 touchdowns and 1 interception. So more touchdowns, 1 less interception.
Okay.
Over the last 3 weeks, those same guys, if you're just looking at the last 3 weeks, player A, 821 yards, 6 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Player B, 903 yards, so just over 80 more, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Who are you taking?
Probably taking player B, I would think. I mean, he's not turning the ball over. He's still throwing touchdowns. The yardage is there. As we stand this late in the year, and 2 players that are numbers-wise very similar, it seems like, I want to go with the guy that's not turning the ball over right now. That's who I'm going to go with, player B.
I'd agree based on stats. The crazy thing, player A, Drew Brees. Player B, Blake Bortles.
Nice.
He's
outplaying
like we said, very, very similar stats.
That's crazy. That's a great little comparison there, Zach. That's really well done. I think outside of maybe Ben Roethlisberger, but he didn't have a really good game this weekend. I know he was clicking there for the previous 2 games, but I think the best quarterback in each conference the last month, which, like you said, 4 games right there. So in the AFC, I would say it's Blake Bortles, which is crazy to think. And then the NFC is probably Case Keenum, which if you would have told me that this late in the year, those are the quarterbacks that are playing the best football right now, I would have said you're nuts. And that's the way it's playing out right now. Well, now let's see if they can keep it up the last 2 weeks of the season and then into the playoffs. That's obviously what's most important. But, I mean, those two guys are playing really good football right now.
Yeah, they definitely are. And I know I have one league where my quarterbacks – one fantasy league where my quarterbacks are sketchy, and Blake Bortles is in the conversation. It's hard to trust his name because he's been bad before. But right now, I'm sitting there with Matthew Stafford, who's been very up and down. I'm sitting with Phillip Rivers, who's been great and then just had a bad game. I've got Jameis Winston, who's definitely had a bad year so far. He was a little bit better there against the Falcons this past game. And then Blake Bortles there. And he's definitely in the mix. I still can't see me actually putting him in the lineup, especially in the fantasy football championship game. But he's put himself there through the way he's played. He's a guy at the beginning of the season. There was a lot of talk about him being benched for Chad Henne. He was coming into this year, coming off a terrible year last year. And I've been very much impressed with his improvements here. Last year, he threw 16 interceptions. This year, with 2 games to go, he's only thrown 8.
He's cut that number in half. I mean,
that's a huge difference.
That's huge. I mean, that's fantastic. I think obviously a big reason for that is the production they've gotten from the running game and the addition of Leonard Fournette via the NFL draft. And the defense has taken their play to a whole new level, which is really helping. And they're getting points off the defense and special teams, and the defense is giving them shorter fields. I mean, that just goes to show you, too, what makes football so special. What makes it the ultimate team game is you can have situations like this, where Blake Bortles was a laughingstock last year, and this year we're talking about him as the best quarterback in the AFC the last month. So it's funny, all those guys you mentioned, Zach, they all are on the road this weekend. So that's interesting. That's very interesting. They're all on the road this weekend. Some do have some favorable matchups. Bortles, if you're going to roll the dice with him, at San Francisco, a team that's been playing pretty well lately. So interesting. You got a tough and an interesting decision on your hands.
Yeah, that'll definitely be my toughest call this week. Now, from that game, we'll go into our next one. Like I said, 2 straight blowouts here, and this was the Rams beating the Seahawks. Actually, before I get there, there's one other thing I wanted to bring up from the Jacksonville game.
Okay.
And I'm looking at things here. If I'm a bad team, we talked about the Bengals possibly rebuilding. I don't think they quite fit this category, but there's a lot of other teams that fit in. But you look at teams that really turn things around over the last 2 years. Last year, it was the Dallas Cowboys. They took Zeke Elliott very high in the draft, taking a running back, put him in. They flipped from being a bad team to being 13-3, one of the top teams. Now we see Jacksonville. They take Leonard Fournette high in the draft at the running back position, and they flip from being a bad team to being one of the top teams in the AFC. This is something, if I'm a bad team, I look at that and say, hey, we have some pieces here around the running back position. Let's get us a stud running back. Let's get us Saquon Barkley, whoever it ends up being there at the top of the running back class. And that's something that's clearly shown to really change things for some of these teams, unless you're Todd Gurley playing under Jeff Fisher.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you make a good point. You have to be – I'll take that one step further and just say that that's a good idea and that's great and well, only if you're getting that number one guy. Only if you're getting Ezekiel Elliott, who was the number one running back coming out 2 years ago. Only if you're getting Fournette, who was the number one running back coming out last year. Only if you're going to get Saquon Barkley this year, who's clearly leaps and bounds the number one running back. So it has to be that number one guy. It can't be that second, third, fourth running back that's like, he could be good. He's got some good intangibles. No, it has to be that surefire that he's going to be. We knew Ezekiel Elliott was going to be a good player in the NFL. We knew Fournette was going to be a beast. Like we have a pretty good feeling that Saquon Barkley is going to be a good NFL running back. So it's got to be one of those top high-end level guys. And if that's the case, I completely agree with you. The running back position, we've been fortunate. The college game has really churned out some really good running backs the last 3 years, and is setting some teams up for some success in the future. You're definitely right about that.
Right. And I think another key with that too is both those teams, the Cowboys and Jacksonville, had some good pieces around that running back. It's not a Trent Richardson situation. Not that it was just that he was in the wrong situation, but I remember when he was drafted by the Browns and just completely terrible, even though he was clearly known as the number one running back at that time, just didn't turn into anything. I think they do need to have pieces around them. The Cowboys were in a situation where they lost Tony Romo. They still had the rest of their core in place, but they had a bunch of terrible quarterbacks starting the rest of that year. And once they added Zeke Elliott, that really changed things there at the running back position. The Jaguars are similar to that, not quite the same effect, but they've been building up that defense over the last couple years. They have some skill position players there, and now they bring in Leonard Fournette to really change things. So it'll be interesting to see what a team does there with that possibility of drafting Saquon Barkley really high up. And I think the Giants are a team that fit that perfectly.
Don't say that. I do not want Saquon Barkley in our division, please. Don't say that.
Me neither. But I think it fits their team very well.
Actually, you know what? If they want to do that, fine. Because if they want to pass up on one of those quarterbacks, great. Do it. If they pass up on one of those quarterbacks, they're idiotic. That's just my opinion. You have to take one of them quarterbacks. But if they do pass them up, great. Go ahead for it. And really, I want to get back to one thing you did say. Trent Richardson, you mentioned. He's actually playing the Canadian Football League right now. And it's actually doing some pretty nice things there, and is really trying to resurrect his career and try to get back to the NFL. So that's interesting. A couple websites I saw the last day or so has put out some articles about him. So if you're interested in that, check it out. He's trying to do all he can to get back to the NFL and try to get a team to give him a shot. So definitely had some rough goings there with Cleveland and then with the Raiders to finish out his career.
Interesting. That makes me think of last week when we did the episode about some of the high-end draft busts that were our favorite players in college, like Jimmer Fredette, that now he's creating a great career for himself in China, playing over there. Yeah. And now we got Trent Richardson dominating the CFL, still able to have a career out of football.
Yeah, look, sometimes if you still want to play the game, sometimes the marquee American leagues aren't for you. You can still make a nice living and still play the game that you like in another country, whether it's Canada or China or whatever. And those are two players that are doing just that.
So now we finally will move on to that Rams game that I mentioned before we got into that topic. So the Rams beat the Seahawks 42-7 in what I thought was a huge surprise. I know most people thought it was a huge surprise that they blew them out that significantly. It was 34-0 at halftime. Ended up being, it was 40-0 at one point. That was the biggest lead before the Seahawks got a touchdown there in the third quarter. This was just never close. Biggest easily number one player from this game, Todd Gurley, had 152 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground, and then added 28 yards and a touchdown through the air. Just dominated the Seahawks throughout the game.
Yeah, I mean, props to the Rams for bouncing back after a tough home loss to the Eagles the week before in the matchup of the weekend. And they come out in a game that if they wanted to win the division, they had to have at Seattle. And they gave the Seahawks the business, dude. And look, the Seahawks, man, they're in jeopardy of not even making the playoffs. And at this point, I hope they don't. As an Eagles fan, as someone that's, their team's in the dance already, I don't want to see the Seahawks get in. So I'm happy with this. So I have a question for you, though, because I'm on the side that's leaning towards yes. And I don't want it seem like it's a big overreaction because of 1 year or one game. But do you think that this game was kind of a passing the baton game? Do you think this was a game where the Rams are now going to kind of be the face of that division going forward? I mean, they have a franchise quarterback, it seems like. They have Todd Gurley, who has really bounced back and has fit into this new offense under Sean McVay nicely. They have good wide receivers on the outside, a pretty solid defense. Special teams has been very good this year. They're the younger team. They seem to be the better coach team at this point. I didn't think anyone would be saying that, but they are. And look, it seems like maybe they just wanted a little bit more. It's sick of been, getting the shit beat out of them by the Seahawks year after year. And maybe this is their time to take it. I'm inclined to say yes, Zach. I don't like the direction that this Seahawks team is going. You've kind of seen it the last couple of years that they've been, getting off to these slow starts, having to tread water and sneak in late and try to make a run into the playoffs. And it's worked for the last couple of years, but this year it's starting to it's caught up with them, I think. And I mean they're what are they, 8-6 now or something like that? Yeah. 8-6 I think is their record. What are your thoughts here? I mean, do you think this is just a 1-year thing? Do you think they'll bounce back next year, or do you think this is the Rams division now where teams are going to be looking up at LA?
I think you put it a great way with the passing of the baton. I think this is the Rams takeover and establishing themselves as the top of the division there. The Seahawks are not out of it at all. They still have Russell Wilson. He can carry that team on his own. They've had terrible injury issues this year. They haven't been able to find any success. They kind of shotgunned running backs and took an approach where they tried 4 or 5 different running backs, and none of them have worked out this year. They had all kinds of injuries across their defense, most notably being Richard Sherman. That's really hurt them. And even with all those issues, they were 1 game behind the Rams coming into this game. I know the Rams did blow them out. They were still in it. I think this is going to be a fun battle at the top of the division. You mentioned the Rams. A lot of their talent is very, very young. They're going to be hanging around for a long time. The Seahawks, Russell Wilson, still very, very young. They've still got a young core there. They've got to do something at that running back position if they want to make this a consistent thing where they're constantly battling it out. But I think the Rams have taken over as the clear top of this division moving forward until the Seahawks prove otherwise.
Yep, that's like I said, that's exactly where I am here. I just think you're starting to see things kind of catch up with the Seahawks here. You're starting to see some of these older players start to kind of, they're getting banged up here more frequently. Rams got that younger core. Obviously, Russell Wilson is a great player. He can't do it all himself, though, and you really have seen that. I mean, it's just too much for one guy to do all by themselves. And Russell Wilson has done all he can, but it's just a little too much, and it looks like it's not going to be enough to even get the Seahawks into the playoffs. We'll
see. They have a decent schedule. They play at Dallas, which will be their toughest game for sure.
That's a huge game, yeah.
That's huge for both those teams.
How many teams have they got in front of them? I mean, they got, the wild card, the NFC wild card, they are sitting there as the 8th seed. So they have 2 teams in front of them, being the Falcons at 9. They needed the Falcons to lose last night, and they didn't.
But like we mentioned, Falcons have those 2 tough divisional games against the Panthers, Saints, which could drop them down. And we could see a team this year with a 9-7 record not making the playoffs. And it actually looks somewhat likely now, where we have the Falcons at 9-5. The next 3 teams, Detroit, Seattle, and Dallas, all sitting at 8-6.
Yeah, and that Seahawks-Cowboys game, the loser of that game's done. I mean, the loser of that game's probably, you would think, done, because then the winner obviously has the tiebreaker against the loser of that team. And then regardless of whatever the Lions and Falcons do then this weekend, we'll see how that plays out. But that game on Sunday at 4:25 is enormous in the NFC playoff picture.
So that's huge for them. Then they play the Cardinals, who they beat in an away game before, but only by 6 points. So if the Cardinals can do something to win that, could possibly hold back Seattle, but I just don't see them losing that game. I think it's going to come down to that Dallas game this coming week.
Right.
So from there, we'll stay within the Cowboys division there and go to the Eagles and Giants game here, where the Eagles got down early. It was 20-7 at one point, and then they were able to battle their way back and win 34-29, dropping the Giants to a 2-12 record, while the Eagles moved to the complete opposite, sitting at 12-2. Now, this is a game I didn't get a chance to watch on Sunday, and I know you watched the entire thing. I was impressed just looking through the stats, seeing Nick Foles. We talked about it. We both liked his situation, even as terrible as it is losing Carson Wentz. They've got a solid backup in Nick Foles. He came in, threw for 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. So that's good to see as an Eagles fan there in his first game for that team, and threw to 4 different receivers there to score touchdowns.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. I mean, first drive, offensive drive of the game for the Eagles, he leads them down the field, and they score a touchdown right off the bat. So, I mean, things got off to a really good start and offensively for the Eagles and for Nick Foles. And I think that's kind of what you have to expect. Now, look, I know it was the Giants. I know they're not a good pass defense, this and that. But at the same time, I mean, this was a road game in the division. Division games seem to always be tough, especially in the NFC East. And you got to credit Nick Foles for coming out and playing really, really well, and credit the guys around him for playing well. Jay Ajayi, he continues to get more carries week after week after week, and I think that needs to continue. Had another good running game on Sunday. You know, and the offense did what kind of a lot of people thought they would. I was telling a buddy of mine, he asked me what I thought the score of the game would be, and I said I thought the Eagles were going to score 31 points, and he laughed at me. He laughed over the phone and said, "There's no way they're going to score 30 points." I was like, "Dude, they averaged 31 points a game." He's like, "Yeah, but that was with Wentz." I said, "Just watch," and sure enough, they score into the 30s. So offensively, I'm fine. I'm fine with the team. They'll score plenty of points the rest of the way to give themselves a chance to win every week, I think. Defensively, though, it's starting to get a little concerning as Eagles fans. I mean, you let the Giants surpass 500 total yards. Eli zinging that ball around in that first half, and particularly in the first couple drives. Like you said, Zach, they get down 20-7, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, you got to be kidding me. Like, I mean, come on. Like, what is going on? Like, I was super pissed. But, it was early, and you take a deep breath, and, everything kind of worked out. And that goes to show you, too, perfect example of why, if any team was to lose their starting quarterback, I think the Eagles are best equipped to handle it, because they are the definition of a team. I mean, they are a team. I mean, look, the defense doesn't play well, but guess what? The offense plays well, and they also get a big boost from the special teams, Zach. The special teams for this team on Sunday blocked an extra point, they blocked the punt, and they blocked the field goal. I mean, those are key moments in games where when you have a backup quarterback in there, and you need the rest of your team to pick you up. That's what they did, and I think you're going to see that going forward with the Eagles. And as Eagles fans, I know Sunday and then into these first couple of days of the new week here is people are a little concerned about the defense. I ultimately think the defense is going to get back to what they were the first 11, 12 games of the season. I don't think all of a sudden they forgot how to play defense. I think you got to remember, too, that was the third game of 3 straight road games, 2 of which were on the West Coast. I mean, I don't want to sound like excuses, but that's a tough little stretch there. So now they come home. The last 2 games are at home. Only have to win 1 more to get home field advantage throughout the playoffs. I ultimately think the Eagles are going to be okay. I was just really encouraged with the way Nick Foles played really, really good football.
Yeah, I was impressed. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week. I think it's a good setup for them where he gets 3 games heading into the playoffs before that to kind of get used to the team, used to the offense, used to the weapons around him. And it's a good situation for him. And it's great, I'm sure, as an Eagles fan, to see him come out and not throw any interceptions there, to take care of the ball, so they don't have to worry about making it more difficult. And we saw in a close game like this, that could have made the difference there in this being a loss. If he was coming out, turning the ball over like we've seen with some of these other backup quarterbacks that come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't even close. I mean, he didn't even really put the ball in harm's way, really, either. And he didn't blink at all either when the team got down 20-7. So really encouraging what you saw from the Eagles. And now they have they're one of 4 teams to play on Christmas Day. They play Christmas night in the nightcap there. So they win that game, Zach, and home field advantage. The road to the Super Bowl goes through Philadelphia in the NFC.
Yeah, so exciting times for you here with this Eagles team, with or without Carson Wentz, still looking good, still hanging strong at the top of the NFC. We'll move from that.
Real quick, Wentz actually had his surgery a few days ago. I believe it was, today's Tuesday. I believe he had his surgery last Thursday or Friday he had it. And then I saw reports today that he's at the NovaCare complex, which is the Eagles facilities, back around the team in the quarterback meetings, helping the team out. So that just goes to show you the type of person that Carson Wentz is.
Yeah. Good to see. Even as a Cowboys fan, I wish him the best. Hopefully he has a great recovery, and it'll be interesting to see when he's able to make a comeback. If he's able to be ready at the beginning of next year, which seems somewhat doubtful at this point. But
it's on the cusp, yeah.
Yeah, when he'll be able to finally return to that Eagles team, if they'll have to go into next year with Nick Foles or some other option at the start of the season. So we'll move from the Eagles game to the other team in that division that has a chance at the playoffs. Dallas Cowboys moved to 8-6 with barely pulling out a 20-17 win against the Raiders. I'm going to be honest. I watched a good amount of this game. Number one, the Raiders looked bad. Number two, the Cowboys did not look good. They were very up and down. Sometimes they looked all right. Sometimes they did not at all. Dak Prescott barely threw for more than 200 yards, 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Dez Bryant was just non-existent for long periods of time. He had a long 40-yard catch towards the end of the game, which was nice. But I did not feel comfortable at any point during this entire game. And the Raiders had that chance to win it at the end. Fortunately, Jeff Heath comes through, makes an incredible play, knocking the fumble out of the end zone, or out of Derek Carr's hands, and then goes out of the end zone, which is a weird rule. I know it's always been like that, but for the offensive team to lose the ball and then it goes to the other team. Yeah, it's a very strange rule.
Who came up with that? Who in that boardroom when they were coming up with the rule of saying, so if the player fumbles the ball at the 30-yard line, it goes out of bounds, they're going to keep the ball. But what if the fumble goes out of the back of the end zone? Then we're going to give the ball to the other team. And then I guess everyone else in the room was like, yeah, okay, that works. Who were the buffoons that came up with this rule?
It's such a game changer, because
what if that happened? What if that was the Super Bowl last night?
Yeah,
Sunday night. What if that was the Super Bowl and the game was decided because of that? Because of that rule. That rule has to be looked at and has to be fixed. And the ball has to go back to the fumbling team where the ball was fumbled. That has to change. It has to.
It's such a game changer there, going from having possession and almost scoring. And I feel like I've seen it a lot throughout my life where this kind of thing happens, but all of a sudden it's the other team's ball. It's like you don't get a chance to kick a field goal. You don't get another chance to score a touchdown. It's just boom. The other team has the ball. And in this one, it was just game over. The Cowboys were there to kneel it, and that was the end.
Yeah, very weird game. I mean, you had that last play at the end, and then you had obviously the controversial 4th down and short where Dak sneaks it. They mark the ball. They bring the chains out. They couldn't really determine if it was a first down or not. So the ref, Gene Steratore, takes out a folded index card and goes to put it between the nose of the football and the first down marker, and then signals it's a first down. I didn't understand that. I thought that was a Bush League thing to do. When this is happening, too, I'm asking myself, and I didn't hear anyone else mention this, is, why didn't he, get down? Like, I mean, he like was bent over, but like, dude, that's a big play in the game. Like, get down on your hands and knees, see if there's space between the marker and the ball. Do your job. Don't get a fucking index card out and, try to, determine if it's a first down that way. I thought that was handled so poorly and just so – that was a microcosm of the NFL in 2017. The NFL has so many issues. That was just a perfect example of an issue that the NFL has. Like, it's 2017, and we're still determining first downs with 2 poles and a chain link. Like, can't they figure something else out? I mean, really. I mean, we're still back in, like, the Stone Age. Like, there has to be some sort of, determination. Like, perfect example. Okay, on Fox and CBS, on ESPN, every football game you watch, they have the yellow mark on the field that signals first down. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time there, the announcers would always say, well, remember that line is unofficial. We're at a point now that line's pretty official. I can't remember a time being where the ball got to that line and it wasn't a first down. I really cannot. There needs to be a point where, like, okay, someone's watching the game in the booth. They mark the ball. It's clearly on the yellow line on the first down marker. The guy in the booth signals down to the referees with a headset, first down, keep the drive going. They need to do something like that. Plus, that in turn will speed up the game, which they always want to talk about. That situation on Sunday night, Zach, was so messed up and opens up such a Pandora's box for things for the NFL to work on. I was really flabbergasted by that whole situation.
I'm on the other end. I like that they still have the chains. I think it's very similar to a charge or a block call in basketball where it adds to the drama.
That's a judgment call. Like, that's a judgment call, though. This is very cut or dry.
I'm saying because of the drama. Like, there's clearly a foul call in basketball. There's clearly a foul called near the basket. You don't know if it's blocked. You don't know if it's a charge. The ref, usually they make it more dramatic, especially if it's a charge. They're throwing their hand into it. Some refs are doing, like, they're moving their hips. They're really getting some work into it, getting hype about that charge, getting hype about that block. What happened? Shooting 2. You see refs get excited. It's the same thing. It's a dramatic moment of the game. They bring out the chains. You don't know how close it is. They pull them tight, and then it's a dramatic first down. They show the, like, it's 1 inch. And I like the drama of it.
Let me ask you something.
With it taking an extra minute or 2 there.
When you watch sporting events and you go to sporting events, are you there to see the referees, or are you there to see the athletes and the players?
I'm there to enjoy the game. If
you are there to watch the play, you are not there to see these freaking officials come out with the chain. Like it's so ridiculous, man. It is so ridiculous. I think there needs to be some sort of situation, some sort of they need to figure something out, because I personally don't like it. That was a great example on Sunday night of a situation where it was fudged up. And I for one thought, and I wasn't just saying this because I'm not a Cowboys fan, I hate Dallas. I didn't think it was a first down. You could see on the TV, you could see space between the pole, which is the first down marker, and the nose of the football. And then he stuck a tri-folded or double-folded piece of paper, which is thicker to begin with, in between them. That was so messed up. That was very shady on Saturday. That's all I'm going to say. And then he got up and, like, smirked when he was signaling first down. That was very shady. Very shady.
See, I didn't have as much problem with that one. I fully agree with the fumble out of the end zone. I think that's a dumb rule. I think that should be changed. But that one I thought was all right. I kind of like the creativity of using the paper to see if it was far enough. Whether that's the most accurate thing, I highly doubt. But I still
bust out a credit card or a dollar bill, something that's very thin, not a double folded piece of paper that's not accurate. But I don't know. It's either it is what it is, man. I mean, Dallas got the win, a much needed win, a win that if Dallas didn't win, they're sitting pretty rough, and it looked like they weren't going to win, and then the fumble obviously happened. So they set themselves up. Look, it wasn't a pretty game, and not everyone's going to be pretty. But it sets up a big game like we talked about with Seattle going forward this weekend.
Yeah, that'll definitely be an exciting game there between those two teams. Very important game coming up this week. So we got 2 games left here to talk about. We're ignoring the Redskins game. They won against a bad Cardinals game. Nobody cares about either of those teams. They've both been bad all year. Nothing else to talk about there. But we're going to move to another crazy finish at the end of the game, the Patriots-Steelers game. And the Patriots won 27-24, moving both of these teams to 11-3. And really, this game was all about the final couple minutes there, where the Patriots, Rob Gronkowski just took over, and the Patriots were feeding him the ball. Steelers could not do anything about it. They scored that touchdown within the last minute to go up 27-24. Well, it was actually 25-24. And then, like I said, Gronk, unstoppable, just completely shook the corner. Nice little pass there from Tom Brady for the 2-point conversion to Gronk to put him up 27-24. Steelers get a short pass to Juju Smith-Schuster. And this is second time I've seen this with the Steelers where I thought he was going to get pushed out of bounds, and he just took off up the sideline, 69-yard reception, probably about like a 5 to 6 or 7 yard catch at the beginning of it, but just turned it into a monster play, put them right around the end zone. They throw what I was confident was a sure touchdown pass to Jesse James to go ahead. They went to the replay, reviewed it. They called it incomplete. My problem with it, he caught the ball, he turned, he extended his arms, and then it did hit the ground. It did move around, but I am just amazed that is still called as an incomplete pass. According to the rules, I guess it's accurate, but it's so dumb. So dumb. Anybody, if that happened in any level when you're playing with your friends, you're doing some kind of like flag football tournament, whatever it is, anything outside the NFL, that's a touchdown every single time. No question about it. No question about it ever. No argument from the other team. Just a weird way to lose. And then Roethlisberger threw the interception on the fake spike just after that, which was a great play there by the corner. I believe it was Eric Rowe making that play to tip it into the air, and then it got picked off to seal the game by the Patriots. But crazy finish in that game.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the game definitely lived up to the hype, man. I mean, this was the game of the year people were talking about, and it definitely did. Look, it lived up to it. The conditions played a factor in it as well. Saw Antonio Brown get hurt in the first half, and, Gronkowski just taking over. I thought Mike Tomlin was really outcoached in this game. I don't know if you thought about it at the time, but when certain things were unfolding and after the game was over, that was one of the first things that came to my mind was, man, Mike Tomlin was really outcoached in this game by Bill Belichick. Rob Gronkowski was dominating, like you said.
Yeah.
And they continued to just run single coverage, man-to-man coverage with him. It's like, I mean, what's he got to get, over 200 yards for you to start double-teaming him or giving safety help over the top to his side, wherever the hell he is? I mean, he was just getting man-to-man coverage the whole game down the seam and just lighting them up. And that's what they did on the 2-point conversion. I mean, there needs to be – that was the first part of it. The second part of it was the fake spike where Roethlisberger comes out and tells us that he wanted to spike it, but the guys on the sideline said, no, fake spike, and then he throws the interception. You can't do that, okay? If Antonio Brown's in the game, okay, you saw it last year against the Cowboys. You want to run that. I guess I could get away with that, but you're at home, kick the field goal and go to overtime. You would have the momentum at that point after the big Schuster play that gets you down there. Go to overtime. But to do that, and for Roethlisberger, too, to try to force that ball in there, I didn't understand that either. Send the ball out the back of the end zone, throw it over their heads, and kick the field goal. I mean, you didn't have to force that. So a couple things there. Getting back to the catch, I thought you hit the nail on the head. That was a great way to put it. Any other level of football, that's a touchdown, and that's a catch. And that's, doesn't even get, thought about. But ever since Calvin Johnson rule, 5-6 years ago, whenever that was. Now all of a sudden, you're not sure what a catch is, and that's a shame. You have to complete the process of the catch through the ground, and it's a shame. Like if I was a Steelers fan, man, I'd have been real pissed, real pissed, because you had the game, you had it. You had it. Yeah, things happened then afterwards where you still could have won, but it shouldn't even have got to that point. Even Jim Nantz and Tony Romo were saying that's a touchdown until finally they were like, well, maybe the ball moved there, maybe the new rules. It's just, that's a shame. The NFL needs to look at certain things. We've talked about a few of them on this show, I think, to really help their product out. The whole catch thing being one of them.
Yeah, I'd agree. Two other things that stood out to me. Number one, and you mentioned a little bit there, I love Tony Romo in the booth. I really like his insights, especially at the quarterback position there. He had a lot of very insightful, very entertaining things throughout the game. I was very, very impressed with him. And second, the energy at the stadium. Shout out to Steelers fans. That was crazy. I was saying repeatedly, I would love to be there with everyone being that hyped up. Their fans were incredible. The whole game. A lot of times you watch games on TV, you can't even tell that from the fans. You hear them a little bit, especially on a big play, and that really stands out. The Steelers game, it was just constant, especially that fourth quarter, just everyone waving their terrible towels, screaming their lungs. It was such a high energy game from those fans. And huge shout out to Steelers fans on that. Like I would love to be in that environment. Last year, I went for the first time, I went to an NBA playoff game. I saw the Wizards play, and that was one of the highest energy games I've been to in my life. And it was very similar, probably a good bit beyond that level, even in the NBA playoff intensity there. It was just like a playoff game.
That's the thing. I was just going to say it was just like a playoff game. So
very impressed with the Steelers fans there. Now, do you agree with Tony Romo? Do you like him? Or you just kind of like, meh?
No, I've said since the beginning of the year, I've liked Romo. I like what he brings to the booth and gives you kind of that, really does give you a good player perspective, and calling out plays and telling giving you oh, watch out for this. Oh, looks like they're blitzing off the right side here. Like, I think that stuff's pretty cool. I think he does a pretty good job. He's a little corny at times. Like, oh, he's got to hurry. Like, it's kind of like Romo, dial it back a little bit. But that's my only critique. For the most part, I really like what he does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you mentioned, I really like that when he goes through some of the pre-play stuff of when they line up like this is how they run him out on a wheel route. I remember him talking about that specifically. But some of the pre-play stuff just on how they're lined up, very, very insightful. I definitely liked him there. So last game here, Falcons taking a 24-21 victory over the Buccaneers. This was one of the better games of the season, probably the best game of the season for Jameis Winston on the losing side. Threw for 299 yards and 3 touchdowns. So good for Bucs fans to see that finally after he's had a disappointing injury-filled season so far. Hopefully he can continue that to finish out so they have some hope in the future. I know their starting running back throughout the year and over the last couple years, Doug Martin, was inactive this game. It was something with team discipline, but he looks like he might not be back as any part of their future at the running game. So some of the things they thought they had in place did not fall in place, which is why they dropped to 4-10. The Falcons move up to 9-5. They're in one of the better situations record-wise for those NFC playoff teams battling for the wild card spot. Like we mentioned earlier in the show, some tough matchups there with the Panthers and then the Saints coming up for this team. So the other one I wanted to say, Devonta Freeman had a great game. They really relied on him. 126 yards and a touchdown on the ground, as well as 68 yards receiving. He was definitely their top player throughout the game.
Yeah, no, he definitely was, and he had a very nice game, especially after coming off a concussion a couple weeks ago, and No Tevin Coleman last night. He filled in pretty nicely. And I'll tell you, man, the Falcons, they're just not – I know that their record is what it is, and they've won 5 of 6, but they're just not passing the eye test for me. I mean, they won last night, yes. Very fortunate that game doesn't go to overtime, and then God knows what happens in overtime. 2 weeks ago, a game against the Saints, they probably should lose. The Saints really kind of kept them around in that game. They lost 3 weeks ago to the Vikings, a game they were, couldn't get anything offensively going. And then they beat the Buccaneers before that, which, okay, they're a bad team. And then they went on the road and beat the Seahawks, okay. But, I mean, for the most part, the last handful of games, I've just not been impressed. The eye test, because I've watched a few of their games because they've been nationally televised games, I just haven't been impressed with this team. I haven't been impressed with Matt Ryan. I haven't been impressed with the secondary mainly at times with the defense, and I just don't think it's there, man. I mean, yeah, maybe they sneak into the playoffs. The schedule's really tough, like you said, but for me, if they do sneak into the playoffs, I don't see them doing a whole lot of anything because I just think that there's just something missing this year. Maybe it's the whole, Kyle Shanahan leaving last year, and now Steve Sarkisian will be the new offensive coordinator. Maybe it has something to do with that, but it doesn't jump off the page to me like it did last year with this team.
And you know me, I've been down on them all year, so I'm sticking with the same thing. I can't imagine them winning a single playoff game if they make the playoffs.
And it would be on the road, so.
Yeah. So looking forward to next week, the 2 games that really stand out. There's a third game that is meaningful, but I don't have an interest in watching, which is the Rams and Titans. They'll be playing. Like we said, the Titans are down, the Rams are up. I don't see that being that good of a game, although it is important for both of them as they get their playoff positioning. Biggest games we've mentioned a couple times here, Falcons Saints and Cowboys Seahawks coming up this week.
Yeah, that for sure are the games that jump out to you. And Saturday would have been a pretty cool matchup had Aaron Rodgers been in there, Minnesota at Green Bay. I mean, if that would have worked out with Green Bay, if they would have won last week and then sets up that matchup Saturday. But obviously it didn't. So, Sunday games are Christmas Eve, so, get together with the family or everything and, put some of the games on in the background or whatever. So, there's some interesting matchups next week, but not nearly as many good ones as we've had the last 2 weeks.
And Bills-Patriots is another that has playoff implications I forgot about. Similar to the Rams and Titans, don't really see it being a good game. As of right now, New England is a 13-point favorite in that game, and that's about what I'd expect too.
I would agree. Definitely. Being in Foxborough, for sure.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received, so we'd love to continue hearing your feedback. As we continue to build this platform with our podcast, it's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people you know that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.